Although we don't always see it, just down the road someone is alive because the Haven was there to help. In your community, the Haven helped someone work hard, see a future, and achieve self-sufficiency.
No one should have to experience domestic violence or be forced to leave their home because it's not safe. The organization started to work against domestic violence, then sexual assault, then homelessness and poverty. It all ties together from the mission statement of peace, really, and safe homes, safe families. I would say our staff sacrifice a lot every day when they come to work. It's a rewarding kind of work, very rewarding, certainly. Unfortunately, we have reduced hours, so everyone is working at their limit. And that is a challenge to see really big-hearted people stretch to the limit, that they are still committed to the work. They don't want to give an inch. They still want to do what's best for the clients, and they do.
As the government continues to cut funding for social programs, financial support from the community is more important than ever. California law enforcement agencies receive 500 reports of domestic violence each day.
Domestic violence is so pervasive, we couldn't avoid it if we wanted to, in terms of knowing a person who's been battered. If you look at 13, 14-year-olds and you survey them and talk about sexual assault and dating violence, you might be surprised at what they would say. If you say, have you been sexually assaulted? Most of them will say no. Have you been forced to have sex on a date when you didn't want to? Yeah. It depends on how the question is asked.
You don't necessarily immediately recognize as being abusive, because I think we think of abuse as, if somebody's walking around with a big black eye. But there's a lot of stuff that happens behind closed doors that we may only get a sense of.
When it comes to family violence and sexual assault, that's never known any income lines or separations. Nobody's immune to domestic violence. A woman in $1 million bracket might suffer the same abuse as a woman who's on welfare. There are no boundaries for domestic violence. Every color, every dollar, every neighborhood will have it.
The Haven continually develops new programs, enhances older ones, and attempts to expand staff to meet the needs of the community. Please consider a contribution that will help save someone's life.
Domestic Violence Services is a program that encompasses our 24-hour crisis hotline for domestic violence and sexual assault, a 30-bed domestic violence safe house that serves women and children who are fleeing violent situations, and a legal clinic that assists survivors in getting temporary restraining orders.
The restraining order clinic that Tri-Valley Haven offers is very important because oftentimes the only protection a person has is the protection that the courts provide. They take advantage of the help that's available to them from the community and from Tri-Valley Haven, and they start life over again without this problem in their life.
One bed night for an adult or child at the domestic violence shelter or sojourner house costs $45.
For the Tri-Valley, we are the only rape crisis center. We are the only 24-hour crisis hotline. And to think that there may be, a sexual assault survivor who doesn't know where to get help, really, really does worry me. When, staff has been cut and resources have been cut, where you tend to wonder, is there that one person out there that I could have reached out to, but I didn't have the amount of time or I didn't have the staff? And that really does bother me and keep me up at night. And many people come, right after they've been sexually assaulted. Some people come 6 months later. Some people come 3 years later. But whenever they're ready for counseling, we have somebody there who's ready to meet with them, who's ready to talk about the event.
It affects the children maybe even worse in some ways because they are so powerless. They have nightmares. They don't do well in school. And this is a time of development for them. This is a critical time for them.
The less volunteers we have, the more groups we're not able to have. Because children get close to these same volunteers that they see on a regular basis, and they start to disclose things and talk about things. And so it's really important that we have trained volunteers that spend time with our kids in childcare.
The longer children stayed with us, the better they did. Kids would sleep through the night, they'd have less fights at school, they would do better at school, they would be able to make friends. We were very proud of that our children's services are able to help kids. We often see that that's the first time a child will sleep through the night because he knows his mom is safe.
Empowering people to stand up for themselves is very important to me, and that's a big part of my job. And it doesn't seem like it would be that difficult, but people will push you, and sometimes they'll push you in a direction you don't want to go. But I would love to work more hands-on with the high schools in the area and also with teens themselves, so that way I can train them, and then they can reach out to their peers. The information I'm giving them could save their life someday. I have a passion for what I do, and it's about empowering kids to make good decisions.
$30 pays for 2 days' worth of meals for 2 homeless children.
Our homeless shelter in particular is helping about 7% of the people who are calling. There just is a much greater need than we are able to provide. It's a wealthy community, a wonderful community, even a generous community. But there's violence, there's poverty, there's families struggling. We may not know that our neighbor who's driving the beautiful car is just barely holding on to that car, that they're close to losing their house, they're coming to the food pantry for assistance. People are going through very hard times, and here at the Haven we are seeing the result of that.
Average probably about 100 turnaways a month for services, because we just don't have the capacity in the shelter. We provide them with other referrals and resources that might be out there, but if the beds aren't there, the beds aren't there. The same thing with, the basic school supplies. If you can't afford a backpack, it's, every child wants to have, a new backpack and a new pair of shoes to be able to go back to school with. And that's not a reality for a lot of individuals.
When I first started 3.5 years ago, I think we were serving maybe 800 a month. Right now, as of last month, we served 3,550. So that right there tells you there's a need. So we do an awful lot in a very limited space. We are the biggest pantry in Livermore. There are a couple of others, but we are open more hours than all the others combined. So we definitely are the largest, and we see the biggest number of clientele.
With the economy like it is, many families are coming in. It's kind of a sign of the times that coming to a food pantry is mainstream. More families do that to get by, to keep driving their car and keep their house.
Volunteers, make our bags, they sort the food, they pick up the food, they help us keep the pantry clean, they help the clients that come into the program to get food, they provide the resources, they answer the phones, they do everything that could possibly be needed to be done. And there's always need for more help. There's always work that can be done there.
Perhaps you're not in a position to volunteer, but there are other ways to help. Please consider a financial donation that will help Tri-Valley Haven.
If we had more resources, we would focus more on the prevention and education and on the longer term care, and we would support our staff so much better than we do. We try to pay a reasonable wage. We've had to reduce hours, and our benefits are not included anymore. Staff have to pay for part of those, and that grieves me a lot. I would like to fix that so that the people that are doing this wonderful work are rewarded for doing this wonderful work, and we're not riding on their commitment, because that carries, and it carries so much.
That's what keeps me going, is the idea of somehow making this a better world, somehow helping people that can't do it for themselves.
I'm a big believer in what you put out there comes back to you, and I have found the more you give out, the more will come back. There's nothing better than that. I don't know how to describe what it does to you, but it impacts your life in a way that you can't not do it. For me, it's definitely a passion. I never thought I would say that, but there's no way I could do something different.
So we talk about peace and safety, but what it really comes down to, we want people to thrive, of course, but we want them to live.
Your financial gift will help Tri-Valley Haven retain and develop high-quality programs. It's an investment in the future and well-being of your community. And it's an investment in helping people help themselves. Together, we build a world without violence. Thank you for joining us.